Welcome to the Deep Dive, where your curiosity fuels our explorations. You send us the sources, and while we extract the core knowledge and insights, acting as your personal shortcut to understanding complex topics. In this particular deep dive, it's all for you.
hmm
Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of how we, make sense of what we read and see. We're drawing on the groundbreaking work of the Textima Group from back in the 80s and early 90s. Our main source is their really insightful 1993 article in Educational Psychology Review.
Exactly. Our mission today is to really get into the hood of how our minds construct meaning from text and pictures.
Yeah.
Forget that old idea of information just being poured into your brain.
Right.
We're going to explore the very active role your existing knowledge plays in this process and how cognitive psychology's understanding of this has really evolved.
Okay, so let's unpack this fundamental shift then. How researchers thought about reading. It sounds like before the early 90s, there was what they called a profound theoretical and methodological upheaval. That sounds like a real game changer.
Oh, it was. It was a significant shift. The older perspective, the one that was dominant until, say, the early 1980s, largely viewed text as just a vehicle for conveying constructed meaning. Researchers, they often focused on linguistic structures to explain how we just sort of extracted information.
So the text itself was the main thing, holding the meaning, and our brains just kind of received it. But the Textima Group and others really challenged that, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah. The newer perspective, which really gained traction thanks to groups like Textima, redefined text. They saw it more as a structured sequence of stimuli.
Simulate.
Yeah,
Right.
and the crucial difference here is that this sequence doesn't just directly deposit meaning. Instead, it acts like a trigger, activating the vast network of knowledge already stored in your brain,
Oh.
both your understanding of the topic itself and also your general knowledge of language.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the text gives the spark, but our own knowledge is the fuel that actually generates the understanding. So it's not passive reception, it's active construction.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And what's really important is that the mental representations we form aren't just like word-for-word copies of the text.
Right.
Instead, they are rich representations of the objects, states, events, actions, and relations presented in the text. So when you finish reading something, you've built a kind of mental model of what that text was about, not just a memory of the words on the page.
Which naturally leads us to how this knowledge is actually represented in our memory. It's more than just a bunch of isolated facts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can define knowledge acquisition as the process of building a stable mental representation of a possible world. And this isn't just a fleeting thought. It's something that gets encoded in your memory, something you can retrieve and use later.
Okay.
And as the Textema Group really emphasized, drawing on earlier work, your prior knowledge is absolutely fundamental. It's key to your ability to absorb and understand new information.
They specifically highlight these concepts of mental models and situation models. Could you break those down for us a bit?
Sure, think of mental models, a term popularized by Johnson Laird, as the internal representations we create of external situations or systems, sort of like our own internal simulations.
Okay.
Situation models, developed by Van Dyke and Kinch, are similar, but they specifically focus on how we build a mental representation of the situation described in a text.
Ah, okay, text specific.
Exactly. The core idea for both is that these models, which you build from your past experiences and existing knowledge, powerfully shape how you interpret and remember what you read. So when you encounter new info, your brain tries to fit it into, or maybe adapt, your existing mental and situation models.
So if you're reading an article about, say, a new type of smartphone, your existing knowledge about phones, tech, maybe even marketing, that all helps you build a mental model of this new device. Helps you understand its features, potential uses.
Precisely. Your prior knowledge fills in the gaps, helps you make inferences, lets you go beyond just the explicit information provided. Now, the Textima Group felt it was really crucial to move towards more formal definitions.
Formal definition.
Yeah, of both the specific domain being learned, say, the mechanics of a car engine, and the learner's current mental representations of that domain. They were aiming for a more precise, more measurable understanding of how we know and how we learn.
And this push for formal definitions led them to this idea of categorizing knowledge representation into different types of systems, right? They proposed three main categories.
That's correct. Their framework proposes three key types of systems we use to structure our knowledge. First, you've got relational systems.
Okay.
These represent stative situations, things that are relatively stable. They describe the components of something and how they're interconnected. A perfect example is the parts of a car engine starter system and their physical connections. Think of it like a blueprint or a static diagram.
Okay, so that's like a snapshot. The components, their relationships at one point in time. What's the second type?
The second is transformational systems. These represent complex events as a sequence of those static situations we just talked about, but they're linked together by temporal, time-based and causal, cause and effect relationships.
Oh, okay.
So going back to our car starter, this would be the sequence of actions turning the key, battery sending power, solenoid engaging motor turning, finally the flywheel rotating. It's the process, the dynamic chain of events.
Right, so that's the how things happen, the steps involved. And the third type is teleological systems. That sounds a bit more abstract, maybe related to purpose.
You're spot on. Teleological systems represent the structures and behaviors of organisms or complex technical objects as sets of interrelated functional units. This is all about understanding the purpose behind things.
So why?
Exactly, the why. And within this category, they further distinguish between functional systems, like a technical device or a biological system with a specific function, and intentional systems, where the units are considered to have intentions or goals. What's particularly insightful here is that this model explicitly incorporates our understanding of human cognitive functioning, how we strive to build coherent mental representations. So it links how we understand external systems to how our own minds work.
So for the car starter, the teleological system would be understanding that the reason all those bits and pieces and transformations exist is simply to start the engine. It's the overall goal and function.
Exactly. And the Textimi group, they didn't just theorize about this framework, they actively sought to validate it through empirical research. They used the car engine starter system as a concrete example, a functional system, to test their hypotheses about how learners represent knowledge.
And how did they go about putting this to the test? What kind of experiments did they actually design?
Well, they used a range of tasks specifically designed to probe learners' understanding at these different levels: relational, transformational, and teleological.
Okay.
These included things like causal questioning, where subjects were asked why certain events occurred; incomplete event triplets, where they had to fill in missing steps in a process sequence; and multiple choice questionnaires that focus specifically on their understanding of temporal relationships, what happens when, causal relationships, what causes what, and teleological relationships, what's the purpose.
Right.
The key was to compare the performance of individuals who had different levels of prior knowledge about car mechanics. Experts versus novices, basically.
And what did their findings reveal? Did the evidence actually support their three-tiered system framework?
It did, yeah. Their findings consistently showed a clear distinction between learners who had a strong foundation of prior knowledge and those who had less. Individuals with more experience tended to organize their mental representations into more elaborate structures.
More complex.
Yeah, encompassing both functional systems at the overall level and the underlying subsystems. So, in the context of the starter, this meant they understood not only the main sequence, but also the workings of individual components, like, say, the flow of electrical current within the contactors.
Well, novices had a more kind of superficial grasp.
Precisely. Novices tended to have representations with fewer interconnected units and a less complex hierarchical structure. They might grasp the main steps in starting the car, but lack a detailed understanding of how the various subsystems interact. Interestingly, they also found that even novices who possessed general knowledge about cars sometimes struggled to differentiate the starter system from closely related systems, like the ignition system or the car's overall power supply.
Ah, so they couldn't draw the boundaries correctly?
Exactly. This highlights that it's not just about knowing individual facts, it's about organizing those facts into a coherent functional understanding. So the key takeaway for you here is that when trying to understand something new, thinking about it in terms of its static components, how it changes over time, and its overall purpose can be a really powerful way to build a robust mental model.
So it's not enough to just know the parts. You need to understand how they connect and what their role is in achieving the system's goal. Okay. This understanding of knowledge representation, it naturally leads to considering how we process nonverbal information too, like pictures.
Exactly. The Textima group also turned their attention to the role of pictures in understanding text, exploring how written and visual information interact in our minds to, facilitate learning.
Okay.
They considered how these two forms of information differ and how they establish local coherence, how individual sentences or visual elements connect, and global coherence, the overall understanding of the topic. And importantly, they investigated how these differences impact the learning process.
And how do pictures typically represent these three types of systems: relational, transformational, and teleological? What do they look like?
Well, for relational systems, pictures excel at showing the individual components and the static relationships between them. Think of a label diagram of the starter motor with arrows indicating how the parts connect. Simple and clear.
Right, like a map.
Exactly. For transformational systems, pictures often depict the initial and final states of a process, or they might use visual cues like motion lines or sequential images to imply change or movement over time, showing the before and after or the steps.
Okay.
And for teleological systems, effective illustrations often combine both relational and transformational features to clearly convey the purpose and function of the system as a whole. They might show the components working together to achieve a specific outcome.
They also mention different categories of pictures: realistic, schematic, and symbolic. What's the significance of those distinctions? Why differentiate?
Yeah, researchers like Sheen LaRose use these different types of visuals in the context of the car starter system. Realistic pictures aim to depict the components as they'd appear in reality. Lots of visual detail.
Like a photograph.
Pretty much. Schematic diagrams simplify the system, highlighting the key components and their functional relationships in a more abstract way. Less clutter, more focus on structure.
Gotcha.
And symbolic pictures might use abstract symbols or icons to represent specific functions or processes within the system. Very abstract. The goal of this research was to understand how each type of picture might differentially impact our comprehension of the relational, what are the parts, transformational, how do they change, and teleological, what's their purpose, aspects of a system.
Right.
They were also actively working on establishing semantic equivalence between pictures and text. Essentially, can a picture of a car engine starter convey the same core information about its function as a paragraph describing it? Think of it this way. Can a diagram and a written explanation effectively communicate the same key facts and relationships?
So a well-designed illustration isn't just like eye candy. It can actually provide crucial information that complements and sometimes even goes beyond what the text alone can communicate, makes abstract concepts more tangible.
Precisely. Pictures can be incredibly valuable in representing both the detailed microstructure, the individual bits and their immediate connections, and the overall macrostructure that's the larger system and its purpose. They can really enrich our interpretation of the text by providing a different, often more direct and intuitive layer of meaning.
Now, they also investigated how the semantic structure of the text itself influences learning. This involved Jean Larose's study comparing transformational and functional coherence, if I remember correctly.
Yes, Jean LaRose conducted a fascinating study exploring how texts that were structured with either causal connectives, emphasizing transformational coherence, the cause and effect links, or goal-oriented connectives, emphasizing teleological coherence, the purposes and functions, affected the development of what they called token and type representation.
Token and type.
Yeah, think of token as your understanding of a specific instance, like seeing one particular car chase, and type as your general understanding of what a car chase usually involves, the common elements, the patterns. This was looked at in individuals with varying levels of prior knowledge about car mechanics.
And what did the experimental setup involve? How'd they test it?
They had groups of both novices and experts read texts about the car starter system. One version of the text emphasized the causal chain of events, using language like because, so, as a result.
Okay.
The other version focused on the goals and purposes, using language like in order to, so that, the function is. After reading, they assessed the participants' understanding using various measures.
And there was a rather unexpected finding, wasn't there? Something surprising.
There was indeed. They found, somewhat paradoxically, that reading the text which emphasized causal, the transformational coherence, actually led to better learning of the teleological structure, the understanding of the system's purpose, compared to reading the text that was explicitly focused on teleological explanations.
Whoa, wait. Reading the how text helped more with understanding the why than reading the actual why text? That's weird.
It is counterintuitive, yeah. It was a really surprising result at the time, and it made researchers rethink some of their assumptions about how we build understanding.
How did the researchers explain that result then? What was their thinking?
Their interpretation was that perhaps a solid understanding of this step-by-step transformational structure, the sequence of events and their underlying causal links, might serve as a necessary foundation, like a prerequisite, for truly grasping the more abstract teleological structure,
Hey.
the overarching purpose and function.
Okay, so like building blocks.
Exactly. In other words, you might need to understand how it works in detail before you can fully appreciate why it's designed and functions in that particular way. It suggests you might need the concrete before the abstract sometimes.
That's a really insightful idea. It suggests that sometimes the most direct route to understanding the why is through a thorough understanding of the how. Okay? They also explored the acquisition and transfer of knowledge using a different type of text, something about manatees.
Yes, that was Tapira's work. A study using a text about manatees, focusing on two distinct main topics: their breathing mechanisms and their reproductive habits. The study investigated how the order in which participants read these topics and whether they engaged in recall tasks influenced their subsequent ability to recognize information from the text.
And what were the key insights gleaned from the manatee study? What did they learn?
Well, one key finding was that the perceived importance of different statements within the text influenced both reading time and how well those statements were recalled later. But surprisingly, it didn't have a significant impact on later recognition of that information.
Interesting. So recall and recognition aren't affected the same way by importance.
Right. Another interesting result was that recognition performance after a short delay was comparable to immediate recognition if, during that delay, participants had actively recalled information specifically related to the same topic.
Oh, okay.
This suggests that actively retrieving knowledge about a particular domain can enhance the accessibility of related information in memory. It kind of primes the pump, so to speak. This aligned with earlier research on word recognition and memory retrieval.
So actively engaging with the information, even just the effort of trying to remember it, can strengthen its representation in our minds and make it easier to access later on. Really underscores the active role our minds play.
Okay. To further explore these intricate processes, the Textima group also employed sophisticated computer simulations, right? Connectionist models. Absolutely. They used simulations based on Kinch's influential construction integration model. It's a way to computationally model the complex processes involved in text comprehension. These models took into account various levels of text representation, from the surface level words and syntax right down to the deeper semantic meaning and how it interacts with our existing knowledge.
What kinds of parameters or factors did they tweak and test within these simulations?
They manipulated key parameters like the strength of the interconnections between different ideas or propositions within the text, and also the number of propositions that the model could actively consider simultaneously to maintain coherence, like a working memory capacity.
Okay.
They also model how activation spreads through a network of interconnected concepts in our minds as we read, continuing until the system reaches a stable state, which represents our understanding of the discourse.
And these computational models allowed them to investigate not just comprehension, but also memory and knowledge acquisition.
Precisely. They extended these models to simulate how we perform on memory tasks, like recognizing different types of sentences. Were they identical to the original, paraphrased, or maybe logical inferences you draw?
Right.
They also modeled cued recall performance, examining how different levels of initial knowledge and the nature of the retrieval cues could influence our ability to access information. They even integrated principles from connectionist theory.
Connectionism, okay.
Yeah, which views knowledge not as static units stored in isolation, but as dynamic emergent structures, things that are formed and reshaped in response to the specific task or context. It's a much more flexible and adaptive view of how we learn and remember.
So a much more fluid and dynamic view of knowledge, constantly being shaped, reorganized as we encounter and interact with new information. Okay, this deep understanding of how we learn and represent knowledge then paved the way for the Textima group to develop some really practical applications, particularly in cognitive diagnostics, right?
Yes, exactly. Recognizing the limitations of traditional reading tests, which often just scratch the surface, focusing on surface-level comprehension without really delving into the underlying semantic understanding.
Yeah, like just getting the main idea.
Right. Denier made a strong case for grounding diagnostic tools in comprehensive psychological models of cognition. This conviction led directly to the development of the Diagnose battery.
And what is the Diagnose battery designed to achieve? What's its goal?
It's a carefully designed set of tasks, specifically aimed at tapping into different fundamental text processing processes. And it's all grounded in the cognitive models we've been discussing. The underlying principle is to create a detailed cognitive profile of an individual's comprehension abilities and compare it to a standard individual or a normative group.
Okay.
This allows for the identification of specific strengths and weaknesses in their comprehension processes. It gives a much richer understanding of why someone might be struggling with text than traditional tests usually offer.
What specific types of tasks are actually included in the Diagnose battery? What does it measure?
The battery includes several key tasks, each designed to assess a different aspect of text processing. For example, reading times for different segments of text are measured that assesses cognitive effort and comprehension activity right at the input stage.
Okay, how hard are they working?
Exactly. Explicit judgments of importance, where individuals pick out the most crucial information, reveal the hierarchical representation they're building. A reordering task assesses the coherence of the meaning they've constructed, particularly their grasp of temporal and causal relationships.
Makes sense.
Free recall, just recounting what they remember, measures overall comprehension and memorization, and that's analyzed in detail using predicate analysis. Cued recall tasks examine meaning coherence based on specific prompts. And finally, recognition tasks help differentiate between availability, is the info even in memory, and accessibility, is it there but hard to retrieve.
And this diagnostic tool has been applied in real-world educational settings, like with kids having trouble reading.
Absolutely. Researchers like Babinett and Hardwin used Diagnose with children experiencing reading difficulties. They were able to pinpoint whether challenges originated at the initial stage of processing the text or maybe at a later stage, retrieving that information from memory.
Wow, that's specific.
It is. And this level of detailed diagnosis is considered a crucial precondition for structuring learning and remedial activities, as DeSailly put it. By precisely identifying the cognitive structures and processes needing development, educators can tailor support much more effectively. DeSailly even used it in clinical psychology, looking at memory issues in patients with amnesia, so it has broad applicability.
It sounds like an incredibly valuable tool for getting a nuanced understanding of individual learning profiles and tailoring interventions. The TextTima group also developed tools aimed at creating more personalized learning experiences, like the QAS program, right?
Exactly. Poitrenaud developed QASH, which stands for Questioning and Acquisition of Hierarchical Structures. It's a software program designed to model how individuals represent knowledge within a specific domain and also to test hypotheses about the learning process itself.
Okay.
QASH can effectively assess a learner's initial state of knowledge and then guide them through a carefully sequenced series of questions and information presentations, all tailored to their responses.
How does QAH actually function in practical terms? What does it do?
Well, the software uses files containing the learning material text or pictures a bank of questions with predefined multiple-choice answers, a structured representation of the knowledge domain organized as a question tree, and a pretty sophisticated system for analyzing the learner's responses.
A question tree.
Okay. Yeah. It uses logical operators to classify answers correct, partially correct, incorrect. Based on the learner's response to each question, QASH dynamically determines which question to present next and what type of explanatory feedback or additional info to provide. It's designed to adapt, to the individual learner's current understanding.
So it's an adaptive learning system. It intelligently adjusts its approach based on how the learner is doing. They even conducted studies using QASH with children learning about dolphins, I think you mentioned.
Yes, Tapiero, Denier, and Poitrenaud did a study involving kids of different ages learning about dolphins using QASH. They observed that the younger children's response times varied depending on the hierarchical level of the questions. This gave valuable insights into what kind of information might be most beneficial to provide to them based on their current understanding. It helped them refine the adaptive nature of the system.
And the questions within QASH, they're intentionally structured based on those three fundamental types of systems we discussed earlier: relational, transformational, and teleological.
Precisely. The construction of the questionnaires within QASH is directly driven by a detailed analysis of the learning domain, breaking it down into these functional systems. Questions are specifically designed to probe understanding at different hierarchical levels, corresponding to relational features, the parts and connections, transformational aspects, the processes, and teleological features, the purpose.
Gotcha.
Correct answers at one level typically lead to more detailed questions at lower levels of the hierarchy, and the feedback is also tailored. Correct answers generally don't trigger extra info, while incorrect answers prompt the presentation of relevant explanations designed to address the specific misunderstanding.
They even developed specific question sets about the car starter system within QASH, right? Starting with the big picture, the goal flywheel rotation, and then branching down into details about components, location, sequence of actions.
Exactly. And what's particularly noteworthy is that these research-based principles were successfully applied in vocational training programs, like automobile mechanics courses.
Oh, wow, real-world application.
Yeah. In some cases, the students themselves even got involved in creating their own QASH-based learning support systems for specific technical knowledge. It's a remarkable demonstration of cognitive research enhancing education and training directly.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's really clear that the work of the Textima Group provides just a powerful lens for understanding how we acquire knowledge from text and pictures. We've seen this significant evolution in thinking, haven't we? Moving from text as just transferring info
Right.
to a much more nuanced understanding of it as a trigger, something that activates our existing knowledge and lets us construct these complex mental representations.
That's right. And the critical importance of considering different levels of knowledge representation, the relational bits, the transformational processes, and the overarching teleological purpose, along with the distinct complementary roles that both text and pictures play. Those are really key takeaways for you.
And the practical applications, too. Developing sophisticated cognitive diagnostic tools, creating truly individualized learning support systems. It underscores the profound value of this work in helping us better understand and ultimately improve how we learn.
Indeed. This whole body of work emphasizes that learning is fundamentally an active process of construction, one that's deeply influenced by the knowledge we bring to the table, and critically, the way new information is structured and presented to us.
So for you, our listener, I guess I'd encourage you to reflect on this. How might this understanding of knowledge acquisition change the way you approach learning new information from all the various sources you encounter every day? And what role do you believe your own existing mental models play in that ongoing process of understanding the world around you? It's definitely worth exploring further these fascinating concepts of mental models, situation models, and the incredibly active role you play in constructing your own unique understanding.